When I was 7 years old, my mother and I moved to a small town in Massachusetts. It was a rough time for me. My father had just up and left a few weeks earlier. My mom tried to soften the blow, telling me that he had taken a better job somewhere far away and that he still loved me. But even at such a young age, I knew the truth. He had left us. It was Halloween week when I started at my new school, October 25th. As a stubborn 7-year-old, I insisted on walking there by myself. My mother frowned, thought it over, and then agreed on one condition. "Okay," she said, "as long as we walk the path together every evening before school starts, and you promise to stay on the trail." We just moved into a small 2-bedroom cottage less than a mile from the school. It was a nice little place surrounded by forest, but it didn't feel like home with Dad gone. That evening, we walked the path through the woods behind our house. Though the sun was setting, the trail was well lit and peaceful. "What a perfect way to get to school," my mom exclaimed. "Can you believe this house was still available?" I nodded but stayed quiet. "We used to have family here, you know," she added. "I really like this place." The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes and my mom's warm smile. As I sat at the table, she must have noticed how nervous I looked because she sat down next to me and said, "Don't worry, you'll make friends here. I have a good feeling." I didn't know how she could stay so strong after everything, but I hoped I could be like her someday. That morning, I walked the trail to school, just like we'd practiced. When I arrived, an older teacher with thick glasses greeted me and helped me find my classroom. I sat down among 10 other students. The teacher talked about what the school year would be like, but I barely listened. Most of the kids were too busy chatting about their Halloween costumes to notice me. There was one girl, though a pretty girl with brown hair and glasses. She sat 2 rows back, away from the others. She caught my eye and gave me the biggest smile. I tried to smile back, but I was so shy I could barely manage it. After school, I ran down the path, excited to tell my mom about the girl who had smiled at me. But halfway home, I tripped and fell hard, scraping my knee. When I sat up to check the damage, I noticed something strange, a giant crow lying in the middle of the path. Its eyes were clouded and lifeless. "Hello." Startled, I looked up and saw the pretty girl standing a few feet away. She must have seen me fall. Embarrassed, I quickly stood up, ignoring the sting in my knee. "Hi," I said. "I think I saw you in class. My name's Jimmy." She smiled again. "I'm Margaret." We walked the rest of the way together. She told me about her family and how they'd lived in this town for years. Her house also had a path leading through the woods to the school. By the time we reached my house, we were fast friends. "Can I see your house?" Margaret asked suddenly. "You made it sound so nice." I hesitated but quickly gave in. We walked up to the door, and my mom opened it, surprised but smiling. "Well, you don't waste time making friends, do you, Jim?" she said. "Are you going to introduce the young lady, or just stand there?" "This is Margaret," I muttered. "She lives around here, and we met at school today. She wanted to come over." My mom's smile widened. "Come on in, dear. I just finished a batch of cookies." The 3 of us sat around the kitchen table, talking about Halloween. Margaret said she was planning to be a witch, but then mentioned that her family was leaving town for a business trip. They hadn't been able to find a sitter for her. "If it's okay with your parents," my mom said, "you'd be welcome to stay here and go trick-or-treating with us." Margaret's face lit up, and I realized once again that my mom was the best. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. I was too excited for Halloween and too unnerved by what I saw. In the corner of my room stood a tall, slender man with long hair and a thick gray beard. His eyes were cold, and he stared out the window. In his hands, he held a massive axe stained with what looked like blood. I hid under my blankets, trembling and praying he would go away. When I finally peeked out, he was still there. This happened every night leading up to Halloween. The man never spoke, but sometimes he would pace the room or stare directly at me. On Halloween night, Margaret and I went trick-or-treating, but I couldn't shake my fear. That evening, as we settled into our makeshift sleeping area in the living room, the storm outside grew louder. Margaret asked for an extra blanket. "It's in my room," I said, dreading the thought of going back there. But she insisted, and I had no choice. As I opened the door to my room, I froze. Margaret was standing there, smiling. "Who were you expecting? The boogeyman?" she teased. But something was wrong. Margaret's face twisted into something unrecognizable. Her once pretty features were replaced by the grotesque grin of an ancient woman. She held a knife in one hand, her eyes glinting with malice. "Be careful who you invite, Jimmy," she whispered. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the storm. Just as Margaret raised the knife, the man with the axe appeared. He swung the blade down with incredible force, and in a flash, Margaret was gone. The man carried her body and head out into the woods, leaving no trace behind. The next morning, my mom greeted me with pancakes and a smile. "Did you and Margaret have fun last night?" I mumbled something about her parents picking her up early. I never saw Margarator, the man with the axe, again, but I'll never forget that Halloween, when I learned that demons and witches aren't just fairy tales. They're real.